Hello everyone and welcome to episode 62 of UncommonCents, coming to you from a very, very special location, the Future Proof Festival at Huntington Beach, California. And what an even bigger treat, I've actually got my co-host sitting right here next to me today. Normally we're not in the same room, so you'll have to watch us how we contain our excitement. But hello Dean, welcome.
G'day Craig, thank you.
Mate, here we are, Huntington Beach in California. We've spent the last 3 days here at the Future Proof Festival. It's been an amazing experience, right? Like an outdoor festival for financial planners, advisors, and anyone involved in the advice industry. I've got to say it's had a great buzz. It's probably the first outdoor conference I've been to.
You've been to plenty of festivals. They had to name it festival in order to be outside.
But an exceptional experience in a way to actually learn and meet new people and engage. They certainly know how to throw on a festival. But Dean, welcome mate. Let's start with something that's in your mind of one of the experiences that we've had.
Yeah, so the touching on the festival and what great experiences were created, I think here is that whilst they had a couple of different sections to hear from talkers, the biggest difference that was amazing here is they had a coordinated, structured meet and greet on a one-on-one basis. I call it speed dating. And so we managed to have about 750 tables with 2 people at each. And you were able to go and have these one-on-one meetings. Now, we know that lets you meet product providers, lets you meet advisors and other people from the industry and have a 15-minute chat about what's going on. And so that was actually really powerful for me because I got to speak to some great financial advisors and start to understand some of the differences in the advice industry here in the US and some of the similar challenges which we're going to talk about from the advisors. So that was great about the conference. But
you got stood up on one of your speed dates, didn't you?
I did. I will not mention his name. I was slightly disappointed because I was excited. I am a fan of this particular person and no-showed, but I turned that into my serendipity moment and went and sat with someone else who also didn't have got stood up and had a great chat to just confirm and learn a few more things about the industry. So yes, I'm still a little bit disappointed, Craig, but I will move on. So let's start with AI. I think AI has been mentioned 6,227 times. There was a whole fintech alley of opportunities to go and talk to a variety of different things. There would be at least 7 firms saying that they have the best file note dictation software out there, for example. And so it's a really big industry over here in the US. What was your AI takeaway, Craig?
Well, I think the big one for me is how lots of them constantly talked about, it's almost, as we move to the future, it's like you either have for our Aussies back home, an esky, for the people listening here, the cooler, and I guess for our friends from New Zealand, the chillabin. But it's almost like now that all of the information can just sit in there without almost being organised, because the AI can come over the top of this now and you can ask it questions and pull that information out without having to have it so logistically, logically put into place, and also without having someone having to do that in the first place. Like you can scan a license, scan a passport, and it'll draw all the important bits of information, keep them in the esky, and then when you ask the AI for the question, it'll bring it out and give that to the practice. So you can start to see that, CRMs are going to change with that, and the way that they operate, and efficiency is going to become greater than that. But the one thing before I throw to you for yours, mate, is that it's still really evident to me though that AI will not replace human beings in the advice process. It's just going to continue to help make us efficient.
Absolutely. There's been a couple of talks about in the category of human-led advice. And so that's really important, and that will be required going forward. So all of the things here are designed to support financial advisors. There was 1 or 2 mention of robo-advice, but more about actually the death of robo-advice in the context of it was tried a few years ago, it didn't work, and the focus has changed, definitely at this conference anyway, that we're not really focused on creating a robo-advisor. we're focused on creating these tools to support the human-led financial advice. So that's been amazing from an AI perspective. There's definitely a variety of different AIs. We just listened to one about understanding and valuing the relationship, so using all the source data and surveys and all of the interactions to be able to work out whether your client is happy or even more detailed than that on a spectrum of things. And so that's been the AI chapter. It's a buzz here, but it's not the only thing here. Craig, do you want to talk about next one?
Let's go to the fees, because
Yeah.
we've shared a couple of little chuckles and a bit of nudges across some of the sessions we've sat in, where we're hearing comments like, it's about time you start valuing yourself and stop giving your advice away. It's about time we start charging for our advice. Which we know in Australia has been a trend that we've picked up on for quite a while now. So
I felt like back in 2008, to be honest.
Yeah, well, so it's clear that we're ahead. But Dean, why don't you take us through the way their current sort of structure works, and then why they're starting to think like that, which isn't difficult to ask.
So it does take me back to 2008, as I was saying. So the predominant way of charging still here today is actually a percentage of assets under management, as they call it. The bragging or the chest beating in this regard is it's all about what's my assets under management. It's an opening line when an American advisor introduces themselves. And the narrative, there was one talk about trying to change this narrative. That was Michael Kitces, which we all know. Just a side note, he looks exactly the same in person as you would expect, and seeing him online for years.
And has exactly the same suit.
Same suit, same shirt. I think he wears the same thing every day, which is great. But yeah, we need to change that narrative over to firstly to revenue based. But they don't need to do that at this point in time, because their sole focus on charging is a percentage of assets under management. It's 1% plus or minus is really common across the board. And so what we haven't heard, or what we heard advisors need to do, is charge for what we would know, charge for the initial engagement, charge for that value that you create from strategic advice, charge for a relationship. When I spoke about practices that we work with, those practices that charge fixed fees for a client to be a client and to solve all of their problems, that has been surprising. Not one advisor said to me either that they do it, or no advisor said, I know a guy that is doing that as well. Yeah. And so it seems like it is a minority in terms of the number of advisors that might be charging that way, but it's starting. And so I heard the 2008 thing about not attaching all of your fee to the ups and downs of the stock market, and I think we learned that in the GFC.
Yeah, correct. And I think the other common thing that I'm seeing that I know, as we've gone through the same thing back home, is that sorry, I just tried.
Apologies for all the Craig's attempts at American accents.
But the other thing we see is, traditionally bragging rights used to be funds under management. So you sit around a table on industry lunch, there was the chest beat about funds under management, and then it kind of moved into out of that into revenue. And then, it moved from revenue into really we should be looking at profit. And I remember Kitces actually saying, it's not about what you bring in, it's what you bring home as a business owner of an advice firm. And so that's becoming the next focus here. So it's just really interesting to watch the same evolution happen. Yet we're ahead.
Yeah, so we get a big tick in Australia from that perspective, amongst many others. But the other talk that came up, if we keep following this business revenue side, is that there's private equity here, and valuations are up. And so there's some really interesting and frankly large numbers being discussed and thrown around in relation to valuations in the US market. And so we've heard buzzwords of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, wait for it, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times recurring revenue as transactions happening, and then flipping it over to the EBIT, it's in the high teens in order to do that. And the reality is that there's listed companies today that are trading in the US at 25, 26 times revenue, 26, 27 times profit. And so the natural equations work. Can they come to Australia? I sort of had idea that it could, but maybe not as large because the market is really small in Australia, so there is not this ability to combine huge numbers of financial planning firms. We've heard many 250 advisor firms here, which, as we know, there's not too many of those in Australia. But Australia's always traded at a lower multiple even on the stock market to US firms, and so I don't think the same volume of money is coming to Australia. But there's lots of transactions, there's lots of private equity and capital partners, and they're all consolidating, and so that's still a challenge to bring in and take one practice and then buy another and merge them all together and consolidate it. So they're doing all the acquisitions now, and so the next challenge over the next few years is actually merging all those together.
Yeah, I think another one is people. So it's evident that bringing through that next generation and finding the right people to put in your firms, there's the challenge there, like we have in Australia as well. I know one of the practice principals or presidents of one of a really large firm was sort of saying with the young people coming through now, they don't want to not sleep. So yes. the motivation is different in terms of, the people who started the businesses fighting, hungry, not sleeping, pushing everything and anything into it to get it to where it is. That's sort of changing. Whether it's right or not, no one's saying it's right or wrong, but I just love to quote, they don't want to not sleep.
Yes.
They're not willing to put everything and anything into every day into the job. They want it, they're passionate about it, but they've got other things that they want to do too, and so they've got to find ways to support all of that.
Absolutely, and so that's a generational difference. We're going to jump around a lot here, but we did a talk on G1, G2 about the difference of generations. It's very common in the language here to use this concept called G1, G2, and we're not in the United Nations. That's generations, and so the example that I learned, which I found really interesting, was actually that. For the older generation that's passing their wealth down, the chance of losing the advice relationship is not actually on the death of the second, it's actually on the death of the first, because the death of the first is actually when the children rally to help the surviving spouse, in this example, male or female, doesn't matter, but the children rally at that point in time because they know that they have to come in and help at this point in time, maybe because the survivor wasn't the financial sophisticated one, but also just because they know it's the last one now. And so the importance around that was actually making sure your house is in order so that when the children come to your firm to help mum or help dad, that you're already digitized at that point in time. So there's a lot of discussion about 1980s websites here, and so if you've got the 1980s style website, when the children, i.e. the 45 to 65-year-olds look at the website, if the website and everything about that exposure is really old, you're losing the relationship at that point in time. The children are forcing the parent to leave that financial advisor and go to a financially sophisticated advisor. And so that was great. The client portals, the technology here is all about embedding it now to retain the relationship of G1 when there's only one spouse, but then also as you drop down the level, if you've met the requirements for the 45-year-old, you're going to more likely retain that intergenerational wealth transfer at that point in time.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate that point, Dean, because that's the really interesting one, right? Is that we've always spoken about intergenerational wealth in terms of talking to the parents to get to their kids. And that point that Dean just made, and I've actually heard this in Australia recently where they said the kids actually referred their parents back to us. And when we talk about the kids now might be, 50.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
And so that's really going to start coming up now in terms of we've got to shift our thinking to how do we convince the kids to bring their parents to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really, really good point.
Yeah, indeed.
I heard
so,
that one too. Yeah.
That's been interesting. What's anything else?
Oh, mate, there's so many things that we could.
We're doing this live. Obviously, our phones are behind recording, so we didn't write any detailed notes.
No, we got people
here.
walking past going, "What are those lunatics from Australia doing?"
Exactly. We managed to take over the stage. I did a couple of understanding investment technology as well. So one of the really interesting things that I learned about was the concept of fractional investing. So that part in its own is not necessarily brand new. So that's the concept of being able to buy a slice of an Amazon share. I think a couple of the apps managed to make this a reality over the last few years in terms of buying part of a share. What's really interesting with that is there's some technology that's allowing you to therefore create your own custom index. So you've got the direct underlying exposure to those slivers of each company in an index portfolio, and the minimum investment in that is $5,000. So you put $5,000 in, that's getting you exposure to, say, the S&P 500. So you've got $5,000 spread dollar costed over those 5,000 securities, and that's all done through technology. And so the reason why that's being done is actually through for tax reasons, and so there seems to be a bit easier rules around tax loss harvesting here in the US versus in Australia, and so micro churns in that $5,000 portfolio is apparently adds 2% returns by actually deferring and avoiding tax through that, and so that technology is going to make its way somewhere into Australia as well. Potentially not necessarily for the tax side of it, but there are structures now that are able to take advantage of those tax differentials. So that was quite an interesting one
and I think,
as well.
Our trend to SMAs and that type of investing for our clients is definitely on trend. Like that was pretty evident here that's the way to go too.
It's on trend, but like America's huge. So there's, if you think about the number of advisors that are using managed accounts, there's an equal number of advisors, and probably actually more here, that are still in the old school, that they're still managing, still picking stocks, or they're still picking managed funds and creating that bespoke portfolio. The next one that I wanted to share is what it's like, what it takes to be a financial planner in America compared to Australia. And so respectfully, I've come up with this term, which is plumber to planner in 91 days. And so the requirements, frankly, to become an advisor here are actually to pass the exam. And so you can apply for a job, you can do the study or the requirements, pass the exam, and that takes about 90 days, and then you're a financial advisor from that point forward. And so when I contrasted that around the tables here to what is happening in Australia, there was shock and awe that it would take that long. There was some understanding, but definitely not the understanding that, oh my God, that's going to clean up the industry. So they seem to be just okay with the fact that there's bad operators in the US. Maybe that's a numbers game, but there's always these bad operators, and they're not as worried. Whereas I think we've done an amazing job to set the right context and structure for the future. Sure, it's still have bad operators in Australia as well, as we know, but the standards are completely different to becoming a financial advisor here.
Yeah, and I think whilst we're talking about shock and awe, their face when we explain to them what our ongoing service obligations look like.
Oh, yeah.
We had someone in an Uber with us last night that we met, and Dave was taking him through our obligations as they stand right now, and I think his mind was blown.
Yes. So this may sound familiar to someone that's listening, but in the US, the mere offer of an annual review here is okay and deemed as ongoing service. So we know from our lessons of the last few years that the mere offer of a review is not a review, and so that is that's not the case here. So if you email your client and say, let's catch up, that seems to be all that's necessary, which is obviously shocking for us. I spoke about Consumer Duty. That's the UK version of fee for no service that's coming, and no one seems to think that would ever come here, and I think that's because the rules are very relaxed here, and there doesn't seem to be any requirement whatsoever to sort of lift all boats in the industry here in any way.
Well, mate, Future Proof 24. It was a big 3 days. There was lots to learn, and there's no better summariser in the business than this bloke right here. So I would be keeping an eye out for his LinkedIn posts as we get back to Australia. He keeps sharing his stuff. But why don't we finish off on, we had a little bucket list item that we wanted to tick off, and that was to go to one of those really expensive American supermarket stores.
Yes, absolutely.
If you talk about selling ice to Eskimos,
Yeah.
I think you should share the story, which I know you'll do a post on later, but the lead, the 1.5
The water,
litres.
yeah.
Tell them about the water.
So we went to Beverly Hills, and we went into the like the Harris Farm kind of version of Beverly Hills. And so we were just looking around, checking out, doing a little price check on the organic blueberries and things like that were polished and things like that before being put in the fruit stand. But the one that got me, which I'll post on when I get back, but the water that was for sale, and so it was, I think it was a $29 bottle of water, 2 litres. Oh yeah, plus state and sales tax and all of those things, which is a trick for attendees to the US. The price is never the price. It's always tax and tips and extras. But this was some particular water that was infused with oxygen. And that was the selling point, that we had it in water infused with oxygen in order to make you feel revitalized. And so for us at home in Australia, we know that water is what makes you revitalized, not the sugary drinks that are filled with it in everyone's hands walking around the streets in LA and Beverly Hills. So that was the interesting market research that we did. I didn't buy the water for obvious reasons, but there was plenty of people there that were willing and able to jump out of their Ferrari and buy that $29 bottle of water. So that's my fun insight for the market research, and that's our episode of Uncommon Sense live. This might be posted early if you've watched it, awesome, or if you're listening to it later on. I thank you for listening. Comments and chats in the LinkedIn post below. Anything you want to ask us about our time in the US and here at Future Proof, we're happy to share and learn. And I'm trying to get a gig presenting next year or the year after. So if you know anyone or Future Proof people are happen to be listening to this post, love to jump up on stage and share the Australian experience as well.
Hashtag get Dean on stage at Future Proof.
You put it out there, it may happen.
Tell the universe, Dean. Tell the universe.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.